Rob Reiner was worth over $200 million, but his will contains a shocking clause that no one saw coming. What if I told you not a single one of his children will receive their inheritance directly? What if I told you Rob's will requires something so controversial that two of his kids are threatening to challenge it in court? And what if I told you the reason behind this clause has nothing to do with money and everything to do with protecting his children from the same thing that killed him? Some say it's genius. Others say it's cruel. But what if the truth is that Rob Reiner saw the future and tried to change it from beyond the grave? His name was Rob Reiner, Hollywood royalty, the director who gave us When Harry Met Sally, The Princess Bride, and A Few Good Men. And the will he left behind isn't just a legal document. It's a message written in blood about what happens when love and money collide, because the probate documents have been leaked. The court filings are public, and today you'll see exactly what Rob Reiner did with his fortune that has his family tearing itself apart. This isn't speculation. This isn't gossip from unnamed sources. This is what's happening right now inside the Los Angeles County Probate Court as Rob Reiner's estate goes through the most contentious distribution process Hollywood has seen in decades. January 28th, 2026. A sealed conference room inside a downtown LA law office. Jake Romy and Roy Reiner sat across from their father's estate attorney, surrounded by stacks of legal documents that would determine their financial futures. The attorney opened the will, started reading, and within 3 minutes, Jake stood up and walked out of the room, not because he was cut out, but because of what Rob had done instead. According to leaked portions of the will that have now been filed with the court, Rob Reiner structured his entire $200 million estate as a conditional trust, not a simple inheritance. A trust with requirements so specific, so invasive, that his children would have to fundamentally change how they live their lives to access a single dollar. The requirements include mandatory therapy sessions, financial oversight by independent trustees, restrictions on how the money can be spent, and most controversially, a clause that allows the trustees to cut off access entirely if they believe a beneficiary is exhibiting patterns of destructive behavior. In other words, Rob Reiner created a financial surveillance system designed to control his children's lives long after his death, and the children are furious. Let's break down what Rob Reiner was actually worth, because the $200 million number being reported, that's conservative. Castle Rock Entertainment, the production company Rob co-founded in 1987, has generated over $3 billion in revenue across film and television. Rob owned a significant stake. Even after selling portions of the company over the years, his remaining equity alone was worth an estimated $75 million at the time of his death. Then there's the residuals. When Harry Met Sally generates approximately $2 to $3 million annually in streaming, broadcast, and licensing fees. The Princess Bride brings in another $1 to $2 million per year. A Few Good Men, Stand By Me, Misery, each continues to generate substantial passive income. Real estate holdings, the Brentwood estate, valued at $18 million, versus a beach house in Malibu worth $12 million. Investment properties in New York and Montana, totaling another $15 million. Stock portfolio and investments, approximately $40 million in diversified holdings managed by a private wealth firm. Art collection. Rob was a serious art collector. Works by contemporary artists valued at over $8 million. Personal property, cars, memorabilia, another $3 million. When you add it all up, financial analysts estimate Rob Reiner's estate is actually worth closer to $220 to $240 million. And every single dollar of it is now locked inside a trust structure his children can't fully access without meeting conditions they never agreed to. Well, here's what the will actually requires according to court documents filed by the estate. Requirement 1, mandatory therapy. Each beneficiary must attend individual therapy sessions twice per month with a licensed therapist approved by the trust. The therapist must file quarterly reports with the trustees documenting progress, mental health status, and any concerning behaviors. Jake Reiner's response when he read this: "My father is dead and he's still trying to fix me." The therapy requirement isn't time limited, it's permanent. As long as the beneficiaries want access to trust funds, they must continue therapy indefinitely, miss more than 2 sessions in a year. The trustees can suspend distributions for up to 6 months. Requirement 2, financial oversight. All distributions from the trust must be approved by a 3-person trustee board. The beneficiaries can request funds for specific purposes: housing, education, business investments, medical expenses, but the trustees have full discretion to approve or deny requests. Reiner called this financial imprisonment. She's 30 years old, with her own career, and she has to ask permission to access money her father left her. The trustees are not family members. They're professionals: an estate attorney, a financial advisor, and a clinical psychologist. People who never knew Rob personally but are now empowered to make judgments about how his children should live. Requirement 3, substance abuse, testing. Any beneficiary can be required to submit to random drug and alcohol testing if trustees have a reasonable suspicion of substance abuse. Refusal to test results in immediate suspension of distributions. This clause was clearly written with Nick in mind, but it applies to all the children equally. Jake, who's never had substance issues, is subject to the same testing requirements as his brothers. Requirement 4, destructive behavior. Clause. This is the most controversial part. The will defines destructive behavior as substance abuse or addiction, financial irresponsibility, defined as accumulating debts exceeding $50,000 or bankruptcy, criminal activity or arrest, behavior that brings disrepute to the Reiner family name, association with individuals deemed harmful by the trustees. If any beneficiary exhibits these behaviors, trustees can reduce or eliminate distributions entirely, not temporarily, permanently. Romy's attorney has already filed a challenge to this clause, arguing it's unconstitutionally vague. What constitutes bringing disrepute? Who defines harmful individuals? The language gives trustees unlimited power to punish beneficiaries for completely subjective judgments. Requirement 5, the Nick clause. And then there's the provision everyone saw coming, but still can't believe exists. Nick Reiner is not excluded from the will, but his inheritance is structured completely differently. His entire portion, estimated at $50 to $60 million, goes into a separate irrevocable trust that he cannot access under any circumstances. Instead, the trust will pay for his legal defense, already being used to pay Alan Jackson's fees, any psychiatric care if he's institutionalized, basic living expenses if he's released from custody. Nothing else. Nick will never receive a lump sum, never control investments, never make decisions about the money. The trust functions as a permanent financial guardian, treating him as legally incompetent for the rest of his life. Jake supports this clause. Roy calls it dehumanizing. Romy refuses to comment publicly, persisting. But here's where it gets even more complicated, because Rob's will includes one more provision that's tearing the family apart: the charity ultimatum. If any beneficiary formally challenges the will or attempts to break the trust, their entire inheritance is forfeited and donated to charity, specifically to mental health organizations Rob designated before his death. Rob called this a poison pill. Estate attorneys call it legal coercion, and it means Jake, Romy, and Roy are trapped. Challenge the will, lose everything, accept the conditions, live under permanent surveillance. Romy's attorney argued in court filings that this provision is unconscionable, that it violates public policy by using financial threats to prevent legitimate legal challenges. The judge hasn't ruled yet, but legal experts say the clause will likely stand. California law gives people enormous freedom to structure their estates however they want, even if those structures seem controlling or punitive. As one probate attorney told the Los Angeles Times, Rob Reiner had every legal right to make his children's lives hell from beyond the grave, and that's exactly what he did. So why did Rob do this? What was he thinking when he structured the estate this way? According to people who worked with Rob's estate planning attorney, the will went through 7 drafts over the course of 18 months. Rob kept revising it, making it stricter, adding more requirements. The first draft was traditional: divide the estate equally among the children, with standard trustee oversight until each child reached age 35. Simple, clean. But after Nick's behavior escalated in 2024, Rob started changing everything. He became obsessed with the idea that giving his children unrestricted access to wealth would destroy them the same way it had destroyed Nick. Rob's theory, according to these sources, was that Nick's sense of entitlement came from always knowing the money would be there, that he never had to earn anything, never had to prove himself, never had to face real consequences because the Reiner fortune was always a safety net. And Rob blamed himself, not just for Nick's violence, but for creating the conditions that allowed Nick to never grow up. So Rob decided his other children wouldn't have that option. They'd have access to the money, but only under conditions that forced them to live responsibly, get help when they needed it, and prove they weren't following Nick's path. One friend Rob confided in during the estate planning process said Rob told him, "I'm not punishing them, I'm saving them, because if I just hand them $50 million each, I might as well be loading a gun." But here's what Rob didn't anticipate. His children don't see this as protection, they see it as betrayal. Jake's position is the clearest. In a statement filed with his opposition to certain trust provisions, he wrote, "My father spent his life controlling narratives. Now he's trying to control mine. I'm 33 years old. I have a career. I've never been arrested, never had addiction issues, never done anything to suggest I need this level of oversight. But because my brother committed a horrible crime, I'm being punished with a financial straitjacket I didn't earn." Jake's attorney is exploring whether he can disclaim his inheritance entirely, walk away from the trust, and forfeit his share, just to escape the conditions. But California law makes that complicated, and even if he could disclaim, the money would then go to charity, meaning Jake loses either way. Romy's position is more conflicted. She understands what Rob was trying to do. She even agrees with parts of it, the therapy requirement, the financial oversight for Nick. But the destructive behavior clause terrifies her. In a sealed deposition that was later leaked, Romy said, "What if I make a mistake? What if I have a bad year and accumulate debt? What if I get arrested at a protest for civil disobedience? These trustees I've never met can decide I've brought disrepute to the family and cut me off permanently. That's not a trust. That's a trap." Roy's position is the most surprising. He supports the will completely. In media interviews, Roy has said, "Dad saw what unlimited money did to Nick. He saw how entitlement poisoned him, and he didn't want that to happen to us. These requirements aren't punishment. They're wisdom, and I'm grateful he cared enough to protect us from ourselves." Roy has already started his mandatory therapy, already submitted to the financial oversight process. He views the trust conditions as a gift, not a burden, and that divide between Roy, who sees the will as loving, and Jake, who sees it as controlling, has split the siblings permanently. They said the legal battle is only beginning, and it's going to get ugly. Jake has hired Patricia Glazer, one of Los Angeles' most aggressive probate litigators. She's known for breaking trust that judges initially thought were ironclad. Her strategy is to argue that Rob was under duress when he created the will, emotionally compromised by Nick's escalating behavior, and that the provisions are the result of trauma, not rational planning. Romy has hired her own attorney, but is taking a different approach. She's not trying to break the trust entirely. She wants to modify it, remove the destructive behavior clause, limit the trustee's discretion, make the conditions more specific and less subjective. Roy has refused to hire an attorney. He's accepted the will as written and told his siblings they're wasting time and money fighting it. The trustees, meanwhile, are billing the estate $850 per hour for their time. Every meeting, every decision, every quarterly report, it's all being paid from the estate. Some estimates suggest trustee fees could consume $2.3 million per year indefinitely, which means Rob's money is going to lawyers and financial managers instead of his children, exactly the outcome he was trying to prevent. But there's another layer to this that almost no one is talking about, the emotional cost. Romy described it in therapy, which her therapist documented in the quarterly report filed with trustees, because nothing is private anymore. I sit in these sessions talking about my grief, my anger, my trauma, and I know everything I say is being reported to strangers who will use it to judge whether I'm stable enough to access my own inheritance. So I can't be fully honest. I can't really grieve. because vulnerability could be used against me. The therapy requirement, intended to help, has created a system where Rob's children can't actually heal. They're performing mental health for an audience of trustees who hold financial power over their lives. Jake put it more bluntly. My father turned grief into a transaction. I have to prove I'm sad in the right way, or I lose my inheritance. And Roy, who supports the will, admitted in an interview, it's hard, knowing that people are monitoring my life, reading reports about my mental state, making decisions about my future. But I'd rather deal with that than become what Nick became. Then there's the public spectacle, because probate court filings are public record. Every motion Jake's attorney files is immediately picked up by tabloids. Every quarterly trustee report that gets submitted becomes a potential leak. The Reiner family's private pain is being litigated in public because California law requires transparency in estate disputes. TMZ has already published portions of therapy reports. The New York Post ran a story about Jake's debt. He has $35,000 in student loans, well under the $50,000 threshold, but close enough to generate headlines. The Daily Mail tracked Romy's social media to see if she's associating with harmful individuals. The will Rob created to protect his children has instead made them targets. And here's the cruelest irony. Nick, the son whose behavior inspired all these restrictions, is the only one who isn't affected by the public scrutiny. He's in jail. His trust is locked. He can't access the money anyway. Jake, Romy, and Roy, the children who didn't commit murder, are the ones being punished. Legal experts are watching this case closely because it could set precedent. If Rob's will stands, it opens the door for other wealthy people to create similar control structures. Imagine a generation of heirs who can only access their inheritances through permanent therapy, random drug tests, and trustee approval. A generation financially surveilled by professionals who never knew their parents but have total power over their futures. Some estate attorneys are calling this the Rob Reiner model, a template for how concerned parents can prevent their children from becoming entitled, reckless, or self-destructive. Others call it the control trap, a way for dead parents to exert power over adult children who should be free to make their own mistakes. The California State Bar is considering new guidelines for estate attorneys to prevent trusts from becoming too restrictive. But those guidelines won't affect Rob's will. It's already executed, already in force, and Jake, Romy, and Roy are living inside it right now. There's one more twist, and it's the most painful one of all. Michelle Singer Reiner, Rob's wife, had a separate will. She died intestate technically, meaning her portion of the estate defaults to California's intestacy laws. But she previously told her estate attorney she wanted a simple, equal distribution to all her children with no conditions. Rob convinced her to let him handle the estate planning for both of them. Told her he'd make sure everyone was taken care of fairly, so Michelle never finalized her own will, trusted Rob to do right by their children, and now Michelle's half of the estate, roughly $100 million, is caught up in the same trust structure Rob created, the same conditions, the same surveillance. Romy said in a deposition, Mom would never have wanted this. She believed in unconditional love. Dad believed in conditional everything, and because she trusted him, we're stuck with his vision, not hers. Jake's attorney is exploring whether Michelle's estate can be separated from Rob's, argue that since she never signed off on the trust conditions, her portion should be distributed traditionally, but legal experts say it's a long shot. Community property laws in California mean assets acquired during marriage are jointly owned, and Rob, as the surviving spouse initially, had the right to structure the entire estate as he saw fit, which means Michelle's voice, the voice that might have said, just give them the money and trust them to figure it out, has been erased. So where does this leave the family? Jake has largely stopped speaking to Roy. The division over the will has become a referendum on their entire relationship. Jake sees Roy's acceptance of the trust conditions as weakness. Roy sees Jake's resistance as entitlement. Romy is trying to mediate, but finding herself increasingly isolated. She's not angry enough for Jake to see her as an ally, not compliant enough for Roy to see her as reasonable. The siblings are scheduled to appear in court together in March 2026 for a status hearing on Jake's challenge. It will be the first time they've been in the same room since Rob's funeral. Sources close to the family say none of them are speaking outside of legal proceedings. The family that Rob tried to protect with his elaborate trust structure has been destroyed by it. And then there's the question no one wants to answer. What happens to Nick's share if he's convicted? The will provides for this. If Nick is incarcerated for life, his trust continues to pay for his legal appeals and basic needs, but the bulk of the money, estimated at $50 million, would remain in the trust indefinitely. Upon Nick's death, that money would be distributed to Jake, Romy, and Roy equally, with the same conditions still in place, which means Nick's siblings are in the impossible position of knowing they'll eventually inherit his share. That his death will make them wealthier. Jake has already announced he'll donate any money he inherits from Nick's share. Roy hasn't decided. Romy said she can't think about it yet, but the fact that they have to think about it at all, that Rob's will has created a situation where his children financially benefit from their brother's imprisonment or death, is maybe the most devastating thing about this entire situation. My Rob Reiner's attorney released a statement on behalf of the estate. Mr. Reiner spent 18 months carefully crafting his estate plan with the guidance of the best legal and financial minds in California. Every provision was deliberate. Every condition was chosen with his children's long-term well-being in mind. He understood these requirements might be difficult, but he believed they were necessary. And he trusted that in time his children would understand his reasoning. The statement was lawyered to perfection. No emotion, no acknowledgement of the pain these conditions are causing. Just legal justification for what many see as control from beyond the grave. Jake's response, posted on social media: "My father was a brilliant director who controlled every frame of every film he made. I guess he decided his children's lives were just another movie he could edit. I love him, I miss him, and I'm furious at him, all at the same time." That post got 2 million likes, thousands of comments from people sharing their own stories of controlling parents, complicated inheritances, and family money that destroyed relationships. Because the Reiner estate battle isn't just about one Hollywood family, it's about something much bigger. What parents owe their adult children, what money means, whether love can exist inside conditions. The hearing in March 2026 will determine the future of Rob's will. The judge will decide whether the trust conditions are enforceable or whether they violate public policy by being too restrictive. Legal analysts are split. Some believe the judge will uphold the will entirely. Others think certain provisions, particularly the destructive behavior clause, will be struck down as too vague. But even if Jake wins his challenge, even if the conditions are removed, the damage is done. The family is broken, trust is gone, and $200 million, the fortune Rob spent his life building, has become the weapon that finished what Nick started. Rob Reiner wanted to protect his children. Instead, he created a system that surveils them, judges them, and punishes them for being imperfect. He wanted to prevent another Nick. Instead, he ensured that Jake, Romy, and Roy would spend years fighting each other instead of healing together. He wanted his legacy to be love. Instead, it's control. And here's the final haunting detail, the one that keeps the trustees up at night, according to someone who's seen the confidential reports. In therapy, all 3 siblings have said the same thing in different ways. Jake: "I wish my father had just left me nothing. At least then I'd be free." Romy: "I can't grieve him properly because I'm too angry at what he did to us." Roy: "I defend the will in public because I believe that's what he wanted, but privately I wonder if he was punishing us for not saving him from Nick." 3 children, 3 different reactions. One shared truth: the money hasn't made their lives better, it's made their lives impossible. And Rob Reiner, the man who believed in happy endings, who directed some of the most beloved feel-good films ever made, left behind a legacy that feels like a tragedy with no resolution. If Rob Reiner was worth over $200 million, but his will contains a clause that no lawyer, no judge, no amount of therapy can fix. The clause that says love can be conditional, that trust requires surveillance, that protecting someone means controlling them, and his children are learning the hardest lesson money can teach, that sometimes the worst inheritance isn't poverty, it's wealth with strings attached, strings that tighten the more you struggle, strings that turn family into adversaries and grief into a legal battle. The probate documents are public. The court filings are real. The therapy reports have been leaked. This isn't speculation. This is happening right now. 3 siblings trapped in their father's final film, a story he wrote and directed from beyond death, a story with no ending yet. If this opened your eyes to something you've never thought about, like this video, comment below. Is Rob's will protective or controlling? Share this so others understand that money doesn't solve problems. Sometimes it creates them. And subscribe for more stories that expose the truth behind Hollywood's polished surface. Stories about real families facing impossible choices. Stories that prove legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's how you make people feel when you're gone. Because Rob Reiner left his children $200 million. And they'd trade every dollar to have him back. Not the controlling father who wrote the will. The loving father who existed before fear took over. And that's the real tragedy. Money can't buy that back. No amount can.